this is my review of that time I got reincarnated as a slime. Okay, so in this episode, Rimuru and all of his allied nations actually formally finished their meeting and their plan for the future of Tempest to actually kind of propose how Rimuru became a Demon Lord, and also the Kingdom of Falian finally enters a diplomatic agreement with Rimuru and the Nation of Tempest. And I'll get to all of that in a minute. But first and foremost, we have to unpack what Ramiris' warning is at the start of the episode, because it's the titular thing that happens in this episode. Obviously, it's important. Is it? Sort of. So she does indeed formally show up and announce that the Nation of Tempest is doomed to fall. However, before she can further elaborate, she's picked up by Diablo, who questions who she is and whether or not he should cross her hand underfoot. And it's just a very funny scene of her struggling because he has her wings just pinned between his fingers, and she is kind of struggling a little bit to get away from him because he's obviously a very powerful demon, and she's a demon, and even a demon lord isn't powerful enough to resist him. So. And everybody's a little confused who she is. So Rimuru elaborates that she's a Ramiris of the Labyrinth and is indeed a demon lord. And he does point out that she is indeed a very close friend of his. Similar to Veldora. And as mention of the name Veldora, she points out that she doesn't really that she isn't really all that scared of Veldora, pointing out that according to her own claims, she socked Veldora in the jaw a long time ago, and is since kind of proud of the fact that she can take her own against him. Although, as it turns out, that's all just bluster, because Rimuru takes her and then puts her in Veldora's care to babysit until they're done with the meeting. And the second she realizes that it's Veldora in a human form, she just kind of faints. And it's just this really funny scene where where all this build up and then it just doesn't pay off at all. And sure enough, Veldora isn't even entirely sure what to make of her. He just kind of looks at her a little funny, and she just kind of faints. But in any case, they then proceed to go into delegation about how they're actually planning to proceed. So Rimuru came up with a fairly convoluted plan, which he later admits was all King Gazelle's idea, but he decided to fine tune it a little bit and make it into something a little bit more feasible. So obviously we know the actual true story about how the Kingdom of Falmouth invaded the nation of Tempest, and Rimuru wiped the entire army out, save for a few guys that his followers wiped out instead to actually bring down the barrier. But in addition to that, Rimuru decides to actually tweak the story a little bit to make him look like a good guy, which, to be fair, he is a good guy, but the fact that he killed like 20,000 people probably isn't going to sit well with a lot of people. So he then proceeds to propose his plan. He's going to explain how he became a Demon Lord, but not actually give the solution to how he became a Demon Lord. And then explain how the Kingdom of Falmouth invaded, like they actually did. But instead they actually fought an even battle against the armies of Tempest, and it was this struggle that ultimately woke up Veldora. And Veldora then proceeded to wipe out the Falmouth army, and then Rimuru managed to form a pact with Veldora, and they became friends. And long story short, that's just Rimuru's solution on how to actually cover up the entire situation of how he killed 20,000 people to make himself look like a good guy. And obviously everybody's in agreement with it, but Rimuru does ask Veldora what his opinions on the matter are, since obviously with this reworked explanation of how Rimuru became a Demon Lord, that would place most of the blame on Veldora. But as it turns out, Veldora couldn't give less of a shit. As it turns out, Veldora made plans long ago to actually shoulder any of the burdens that Rimuru had, and thus is more than happy to actually bear with to actually bear Rimuru's sins as his own. So, and with that, tells Rimuru that he's basically allowed to use the name of the Storm Dragon however he sees fit. So with that, Rimuru decides that that's actually a good plan, and then proceeds, and then Benimaru then points out that with this entire explanation in place, they're now they're not fully in place to actually go on and take on Clayman. And Rimuru does concede that is indeed the place, but first and foremost, he does make his proposal regarding Yum and how he's going to become King of Falmouth, and how he plans to back Yum as the King of Falmouth. And everybody's a little shocked about that, pointing out that Yum doesn't seem like the kind of guy who would be a good king. But the entire idea is that Yum actually returns as a conquering hero, and that ultimately Rimuru's plan is to release the old King of Falmouth, King Ramiris, and turn him into, and basically incite a rebellion inside the Kingdom of Falmouth, so that old pal Yum can actually take it over from the inside out. So, and nobody has it, and everybody it does kind of shows kind of support Yum, but Gazelle Dorgo actually does have a few objections, and does proceed to ask Yum if he could actually bear the sins of his people and would actually be able to support them as a proper king would. And throughout this entire sequence, it's shown that Yum is a little bit intimidated by Gazelle Dorgo. I mean, obviously, he's the king of the dwarf nation, so that makes perfect sense. But it's portrayed as Gazelle having this huge, massive aura that just encompasses everything. And Yum is just kind of shrinking in his wake. So, yeah, but then Yum does reaffirm that how he plans to actually become leader of the nation. Explaining how he's not joining it because he wants to be. It's because he had a lot of trust put in him by Rimuru that he wants to actually become leader of the nation of Falmouth. And B, long story short, he just wants to impress the woman he loves by becoming king, which causes Mulem to actually blush in embarrassment. But in any case, with that, he does confirm that he can actually be a decent king if the situation allows him. And both Grucius and Mulem do propose that they'll keep an eye on him for as long as they take to until they are certain that he's actually can be a decent king. So they'll decide to keep an eye on him and point out that while he is a little bit foolish, he is reliable. And that they'll continue to serve him until the end of his days, which since they're both Majin will probably be a lot sooner than theirs. But Gazelle Dorgo, completely satisfied with that, does decide to actually back Yum as king as well. As does Fuse, who kind of sees no problem with the plan and decides to continue backing to back Yum as the new king of Falmouth. But they also remark that they're actually going to need something but Gazelle Dorgo himself actually does remark that they're actually going to need something that the Kingdom of Falmouth actually specializes in, and so that they can actually kind of monopolize it, as it were. Because at current, the Kingdom of Falmouth, or at least before Rimuru wiped out its entire army, the Kingdom of Falmouth didn't really specialize in anything other than trade. Its entire thing was to just import everything as the center of the world and just kind of impose high tariffs on everything. That was their entire thing. But now, obviously, Rimuru City has taken over as the center of trade. So, obviously, the Kingdom of Falmouth needs something else. So Gazelle Dorgo actually suggests that he takes up agriculture and that they actually start growing crops in the Kingdom of Falmouth. And Yum actually isn't opposed to that, pointing out that the kingdom actually does have pretty good agriculture, and he wouldn't see the citizens actually objecting to that. So he feels like that could actually be a good way to actually move forward with the nation. But now that everybody's in agreement, they all proceed to applaud. They all proceed to become very, very proud and kind of get ready to make preparations to actually take on Clayman. but everybody does point out that he is but as they're actually making preparations to do that, Elalud actually kind of laughs at the whole situation, and then we find out why. As it turns out, he finds it a little bit preposterous that Fuse, of all people, is actually siding with a nation of monsters. And then it proceeds to explain why he thinks that's so preposterous, because in his situation, he does think that Fuse isn't being completely 100% honest with them, and he's right, but not for the reasons you'd expect. And proposes that Fuse would actually, that if Fuse were indeed working with the Nation of Monsters, they wouldn't immediately go into an entire nation. They wouldn't go into an entire thing. They would actually slowly work out what the Kingdom of Monsters actually stands for, and then report back to the Western Holy Church. Or at least that's what Elalud would do if he were in the same position. And obviously Fuse then proceeds to get up and explain that's not exactly far off, but he does explain why he decides to side with the Nation of Monsters instead, rather than actually side with the church. So as he explains, obviously he comes from a very small nation. Obviously they're not very powerful, and that means that any one mistake, they could be their last. But as the chief investigative officer of his kingdom, he obviously has to be able to make diplomatic relations with other nations, and that's part of his job. Part of his job is to actually go out and make diplomatic relations with other nations. It points out that it was ultimately his superior who decided to side with the Nation of Monsters instead of the Holy Church. But he does remark that if the situation had been flipped, he still would have sided with the Nations of Monsters, because he trusts Rimuru and believes that Rimuru would actually be able to protect him if he decided to break his contract with his nation. So he's just fortunate that they actually did decide to side with the Nation of Monsters, because that was what his plan was all along. And Rimuru does appreciate that sentiment. And so as does Elalud. But then Elalud decides that obviously he has one last question for Rimuru before he decides to actually enter diplomatic relations with him, while Eren does kind of scold him for putting on airs, which kind of breaks apart his whole Elalud the tactician thing that Gazelle Dorgo remarks that he's known for. Rimuru decides to just kind of honor his ideals and actually honor his question. So he unleashes his aura on everybody, and they quickly realize that he's not bluffing, that he is indeed a demon lord. But then Rimuru asks Elalud what his question is, and Elalud just asks him straight up, what does he want to do with his power now that he has it? And Rimuru just reaffirms and Rimuru asks if that's all, and then reaffirms his position on what he's planning to do, which has been his entire plan for the entire series. He wants to make a world where everybody can kind of just live in peace. He doesn't want anybody fighting. He doesn't want anybody squabbling. He just wants everybody to just be able to work, to be able to live comfortably and not have to worry about things like war. And while Elalud is a little confused as to whether or not Rimuru could actually pull it off, pointing out that such a thing should surely be out of anybody's grasp. Rimuru does point out that he feels like ideals without power or couldn't be backed up, and then vice versa, pointing out that he does need that. Obviously, you need strong ideals to actually carry out your plan, and you need the power to actually do it. And obviously, he has both. He has the strong conviction to actually make this fantasy world a reality, and B, he wants to actually he has the power to actually support those claims and actually keep everybody on that track. And with that, Elalud is finally satisfied and then enters a deep bow and offers to formally enter a trade agreement with the Kingdom of Tempest. And obviously Eren and her friends actually just kind of bow their heads as well, because obviously he's their king, or at least he's their Archduke who supports their king. So he does bow down. So they do bow down, and Rimuru extends his hand in friendship to Elalud, and agrees to work with him. And now he's actually allied himself with 3 different nations, and or at least he's allied himself with several nations, and now 3 of them are humans. So now he's allied himself with the Sorcerer's Kingdom dynasty of Thalion, and now he can actually work with them on a close working relationship, which is nice. He's slowly but surely forming relationships with every other nation around him, and it's only a matter of time before he's entered diplomatic relationships with all of them, and they're all working together in harmony. But with that, he finally proceeds to make plans to actually go after Clayman, and test Benimaru with making those preparations. Obviously everybody cheers because this is what the series has been building to. But and obviously that's going to be the climax of this season. But obviously everybody who isn't a member of Tempest has some concerns. Namely Gazelle Dwargo, who points out that Clayman is a very powerful demon lord, and obviously he shouldn't be taken lightly. Even though we know he's not actually a demon lord, and Rimuru knows this. And Rimuru merely responds that the main reason he's going after Clayman is because he pissed him off. Because long story short, Clayman has just been manipulating things from behind the scenes and is just trying to kind of get Rimuru in a position where he can successfully dethrone him and destroy him. But obviously Rimuru isn't going to take that line down. And obviously Rimuru does believe that Clayman has indeed abused his power quite a bit. Especially since he's actually manipulated Mulum. Obviously, Mulum has been under his control for quite a bit, and obviously, now that she and Rimuru are friends, and Rimuru has saved her from Clayman, then obviously he's going to have to get revenge on everybody's behalf, since it was his reason that the entire war with Falmouth actually started in the first place. And then also he created the orc disaster, which Rimuru had to defeat, and that was just rampaging through the countryside. So yeah, obviously Clayman is very high up on Rimuru's shit list. Obviously Rimuru wants to deal with him as soon as possible, and now that they have the allies to actually do it, they can actually go in and storm Clayman's fortress and actually take him out. At which point it then proceeds to cut to Clayman himself, who is actually having a conversation with Laplace. Laplace does actually weigh in his concerns with Clayman's plan. And Clayman's plan, now that the Kingdom of Falmouth has been wiped out by Rimuru, his next plan, thanks to Millam, is to actually go to the Beast Kingdom of Uzurania and actually take out the civilians to actually become a demon lord, because obviously his main plan failed. He now needs a backup. And Laplace does internalize his concerns, but decides not to tell Clayman since they're buds. But does proceed to explain how Clayman should be careful, and also shouldn't do anything too hasty, since obviously World Purchase is coming up, so he should wait for that to happen before he actually goes off and tries to become a demon lord. Clayman actually does suggest that he actually does have no choice, since he doesn't need to make Rimuru pay for killing Mulum. Thanks to Rimuru, Clayman now thinks Mulum is dead, so he doesn't know that she's actually allied herself with the Nation of Tempest. He doesn't know that she's actually working on a close relationship with him. So yeah, he just thinks she's dead, and obviously Laplace does express his discomfort on that as well, pointing out that he did like having her around, and is a little bit disappointed that she's gone. And also Clayman does reinforce his position on Rimuru, pointing out that as Laplace is actually top tier, and Clayman himself, that they should take good care of their tools. And obviously, since he thinks Mulum is dead and Rimuru was the one who quote unquote killed her, that obviously means that he has to now focus his aggression on Rimuru, since Rimuru broke one of his tools. So and Laplace has no sauce in that, but he does point out that he should be careful and does wonder where Clayman actually came up with this idea, since obviously there's only two people that Clayman would actually trust, being the person being the president Kazarimu, who we literally just met and literally just got revived, albeit in a homunculus elf body. And the person that Clayman is indebted to, who we haven't met yet. So obviously there's a bit of an issue there as well. So Clayman remarks that he's only working for himself, and that there's only two people he would take orders from, but neither of them gave him this idea. So obviously there's nothing he should worry about. And Laplace concedes with that, but then gives Clayman some friendly advice regarding Milim, pointing out that she is indeed far older than even their presidents, and that he should be careful about his control over her, because it's not entirely 100% clear if she can actually be controlled, or at least for very long. So he asks Clayman to just keep an eye on her and make sure nothing goes wrong with her. And with that, he then takes his leave by disappearing into a flash of smoke. And immediately after their conversation ends, Clayman breaks the wine glass that he was holding, and then proceeds to wonder why Laplace actually said all those things, pointing out that if he thinks that there's actually somebody who's controlling Clayman. So yeah, this episode is interesting. So it now shows that Tempest is now on a track to actually expose Rimuru as a Demon Lord, and also make it look like he didn't just slaughter 20,000 people to ascend as a Demon Lord. And more to the point, it shows that Clayman may have somebody else that he's working for. Or at least it's implied that he has somebody he's working for. But it's possible that he's actually being manipulated by somebody he thinks is under his control. So who knows? That's a very interesting possibility with that. Clayman's a smart guy. He's kind of a little bit scary as a villain, mainly because he wants to just wipe Tempest off the face of the earth, and he will do everything in his power to do that. But it's entirely possible but we know But we also know that Laplace is working for Yuki at this point, so it's possible that Laplace is referring to Yuki here. It's possible that Clayman is being manipulated by Yuki to do his bidding, and he has no idea. So yeah, that's going to be interesting to unpack in a further episode. But for right now, that's going to do it for my review of That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. What do you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. And also, be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It really helps me out. And you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks. I'm always saying thanks. So be sure to check those out in the description below as well. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter if you want to help support me that way. I keep up to date with what's going on over there. Be sure to go do that. Also, be sure to check out my Twitch. I stream every Sunday, 2:30 Eastern Standard Time, schedule permitting. So if you guys want to go check that out, you can either check it out on the end screen. It's listed on the end screen on my end slate. You can also check the link down in the description, or go to twitch.tv/ZackMarsh.twitch. Any of those methods will actually work. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new, or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But regardless of whether or not to do any or all of those things, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, we'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!